I bought my first house at 34. 3 bedrooms, real kitchen, a front door that locked from the inside. 13 years of working late-night shifts, saving every dollar, building a dessert business from nothing. And finally, I had something that was completely mine. The house sat on a quiet street in Denver's East Side. Nothing fancy, just a solid structure with good bones and enough space that I didn't have to fold myself into corners anymore. The kitchen had counter space. Actual counter space. Not the cramped galley setup I'd been working with in my studio apartment, where I had to choose between a cutting board or a mixing bowl because there wasn't room for both. The closing happened on a Friday afternoon. I signed papers until my hand cramped. Watched the keys slide across the table toward me. Heavy, real, mine. I'd saved for this, sacrificed for this. Worked doubles and triples, said no to dinners out, new clothes, vacations, anything that wasn't rent and business expenses. Every extra dollar went into an account I labeled someday because I didn't want to jinx it by calling it what it was. Freedom. The moving truck left on a Tuesday. I stood in my empty living room with a folding chair and a box of leftover cupcakes, feeling like I'd crossed some invisible line between surviving and actually living. The silence in that house was different from the silence in my apartment. It wasn't the quiet of smallness, of making yourself fit into spaces too tight. It was the quiet of possibility, of rooms waiting to be filled with choices I actually wanted to make. That night, I sat in my folding chair eating a chocolate cupcake and staring at walls that belonged to me. Not a landlord, not a bank holding a lease. Me. My name on the deed. My decision about what happened next. I slept on an air mattress that first night. No furniture yet. Just me and the echo of my footsteps on hardwood floors. And I slept better than I had in over a decade. The next morning, I woke up to knocking. Loud, persistent. Way too early for deliveries. I thought maybe it was a neighbor, someone welcoming me to the block with cookies or a casserole. That's what happens in normal neighborhoods, right? I pulled on sweatpants and walked to the front door, still half asleep, looked through the peephole, and froze. My entire family stood on my porch. My mother, my sister Maya, 2 cousins I barely recognized, all of them, uninvited, with suitcases. I hadn't seen them in 13 years. Not a single phone call, not one text message, not even a Facebook friend request. 13 years of silence so complete, I'd stopped expecting it to ever break. But apparently, now that I had something worth taking, the silence was over. My name is Haley Carter. I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of what happened when the family who erased me for 13 years decided I was suddenly worth remembering. Before I tell you what I did when I opened that door, tell me something. What time is it where you are right now? Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I want to know how far this story travels. The pattern started long before I understood what I was watching. I was the oldest. Maya was 4 years younger. That age gap came with unspoken expectations nobody bothered to explain. They just appeared, like items added to a list I never agreed to carry. I got my first job at 16. Diner on the edge of town that served breakfast until 2 p.m. and smelled like burnt coffee and maple syrup. I worked weekends, then added weekday shifts, then somehow found myself covering other people's call-outs because I was reliable. That word followed me everywhere. Reliable, responsible, the one we can count on. I handed over most of my paychecks without being asked. It was just understood. Family needed help. I could help, so I did. Gaps filled themselves because I was there to fill them. Maya grew up under completely different rules. She had this softness people mistook for fragility. Teachers loved her. Neighbors felt protective of her. Our mother watched her like she might shatter if the wind blew wrong. A scraped knee earned her an afternoon on the couch with ice cream and a movie. A missed assignment earned her a parent-teacher conference, where our mother explained how sensitive Maya was, how much pressure she felt, how we needed to be patient with her. A bad decision. Someone else got blamed, usually me. I got responsibility. She got protection. I got expectations. She got exceptions. And I didn't resent her for it. Not at first. She was my little sister. Of course she needed more attention. Of course she needed more care. That's how it worked when you were younger, right? So I adapted. I became the one who handled rides, who picked up groceries, who remembered appointments and made sure bills got paid on time. I kept the household running smooth because smooth meant nobody had to raise their voice or slam doors or have uncomfortable conversations about why things weren't working. But what I couldn't adapt to was the moment I stopped being the reliable one and became the problem. It happened slowly, like erosion. You don't notice the ground disappearing under your feet until you're already falling. A wallet went missing from the kitchen counter? Questions came to me first. Not, did you see it? More like, what did you do with it? The assumption built into the words before I could answer. A forgotten doctor's appointment? Somehow it was my fault for not reminding everyone, even though I wasn't the one who made the appointment or the one who needed to go. When I tried to explain I didn't know about it, my mother would get this look, this tightening around her mouth. Her eyes would go flat, like I was complicating things on purpose, like the truth was less important than the story already decided. I would have told you, she'd say, meaning she didn't, but she meant to. So it was my responsibility to have known anyway. After a while, I stopped trying to explain. Explanations just made things worse, made me look defensive, made them more certain I was hiding something. The moment everything became crystal clear happened on an ordinary summer afternoon. I was 19, home from community college for the weekend, sitting at the kitchen table working through biology homework that made my brain hurt. Maya came downstairs looking for cash she'd saved for a school trip, maybe $40, enough for gas station snacks and a souvenir from whatever educational destination they were touring. She checked her room, checked the kitchen, checked everywhere, couldn't find it. And then she stood in the middle of the kitchen and started crying. Not loud, dramatic sobs, this quiet, wounded breathing, shoulders curling inward, hands turning upward like she was asking the universe why it was being so cruel to her specifically. Our mother appeared immediately, wrapped Maya in a hug, started asking gentle questions about where she'd last seen the money, when she'd had it, who might have been in her room. I looked up from my textbook. I haven't been in your room. The temperature in the kitchen dropped. My mother's expression shifted, not angry, disappointed, like I'd failed some fundamental test of character. No one's accusing you, Haley. But the room said otherwise. Maya's tear-stained face, our mother's careful tone, the way they both looked at me like I'd already confessed. I didn't touch her money, I said again, slowly, clearly. Then where is it? Maya's voice broke on the question. Small, wounded, heartbroken over $40 she'd probably left in a jeans pocket or under a stack of magazines. I had no answer. How could I? I didn't know where she'd put it. I didn't know if she'd actually lost it or just misplaced it or spent it and forgotten. All I knew was I hadn't taken it. But in that kitchen, my knowledge didn't matter. Facts didn't matter. What mattered was how Maya felt. And Maya felt victimized. So someone had to be the villain, and I was the only one available for the role. That's when I understood. In this house, in this family, feelings outweighed facts. Maya's tears carried more weight than any truth I could speak. Her vulnerability had become currency, and she'd learned exactly how much it was worth. She wasn't being intentionally manipulative. Not really. She just figured out that when she cried, people rushed to comfort her. When she seemed hurt, people rushed to find someone to blame. It was a pattern she'd learned worked. And once a pattern works, why would you change it? After that day, the household developed a rhythm I couldn't fight against. If Maya had a project due and forgot about it until the night before, I should have reminded her. Never mind that I wasn't in her classes or living in her head. I should have known. Should have helped. If she missed the bus because she overslept, it was because I took too long in the bathroom that morning. The fact that I'd been up and out of the house an hour before her bus came was irrelevant. She'd missed her bus. Someone had to be at fault. The math was simple. If she seemed anxious about a test or a presentation or anything at all, it was because I hadn't been supportive enough, hadn't asked the right questions, hadn't made her feel seen. These judgments were never spoken directly. They lived in the air. In the careful way our mother would say, well, maybe if someone had checked on her without saying my name. In the way Maya would sigh dramatically when I entered a room. In the way family dinners developed empty spaces around me, even when I was sitting right there. Unspoken things accumulate, like water damage behind walls, invisible at first, then structural. I retreated into work because work made sense. A shift started at a specific time, ended at a specific time. Effort produced visible, measurable results. A table got cleaned or it didn't. An order got delivered correctly or it didn't. No one invented reasons to blame you for problems you didn't create. Home had none of that clarity. Home was quicksand. Every attempt to find solid ground just pulled me deeper. So I stopped trying to explain myself, stopped defending against accusations that weren't even spoken aloud. Let silence carry the weight, because silence was cheaper than the cost of fighting a battle nobody wanted to admit was happening. That was the beginning of the real distance, not the dramatic kind you see in movies, the quiet kind that grows in corners where no one's looking, the kind that becomes the only language a family knows how to speak. The breaking point came on a cold Tuesday morning in February, the kind of cold that makes your breath visible and your car door stick when you try to open it. I'd let Maya borrow my car to run an errand before school, an actual, specific errand. She needed to drop off a permission slip at the school office because she'd forgotten it the day before, and the field trip was that afternoon. 10-minute round trip. Simple. She'd borrowed my car dozens of times before. I didn't think much of it. That was the problem. I'd stopped thinking much about anything involving Maya because thinking required energy, and energy was something I was running out of. She came back 45 minutes later. I heard the car before I saw it. A scraping sound, metal on metal, the kind of noise that makes your stomach drop. Then she walked through the front door already trembling, coat clutched tight against her chest like armor, eyes red, breathing uneven. The body language of someone something terrible had happened to, not someone who'd caused something terrible. Our mother was at the stove making breakfast. She turned immediately, abandoned the eggs, moved toward Maya with her arms already opening. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Maya's voice came out small and shaky. "There was an accident." I was at the kitchen table, laptop open, working on inventory orders for my business. I looked up. "What kind of accident?" She didn't look at me, looked at our mother instead. "I was pulling out of the school parking lot and someone came out of nowhere and I tried to stop, but..." She broke off, started crying. Our mother wrapped her in a hug. "It's okay. You're safe. That's what matters." I closed my laptop, stood up. "Where's my car?" "In the driveway," Maya whispered. I walked outside, every step feeling heavier than the last. The front bumper was dented inward, not a small ding, a significant collapse, the kind that costs serious money to fix. A long scrape dragged across the driver's side from wheel well to door handle. Deep, down to the metal. Paint peeled away in strips. I stood there in the February cold staring at damage that would cost more than I had in my emergency fund. When I came back inside, the story had evolved. Our mother was sitting next to Maya at the kitchen table, Maya's hands wrapped around a mug of tea, her face blotchy from crying. "She said she was pulling out carefully," our mother explained before I could ask anything. "But another driver came speeding through the lot. Haley, you know how dangerous that school parking lot is in the morning. All those parents rushing." I looked at Maya. "Did you get their insurance information?" She shook her head. "They drove away. I didn't even see them properly. It happened so fast." "Convenient." So someone hit my car hard enough to cave in the bumper and scrape the entire side and just drove off? Yes, Maya's voice small, wounded. I know you're mad, but I'm not mad. I'm trying to understand what happened. I just told you what happened. Her voice rose, cracked, fresh tears spilling over. Our mother's hand shot out, gripped my wrist. Haley, she's upset enough. Don't interrogate her. I'm not interrogating. I'm asking basic questions about how my car got damaged. And she's told you. Someone hit her. They drove off. These things happen. Thank God she wasn't hurt. The math didn't add up, but the math never added up. And pointing that out would just make me the bad guy. I could see it already forming. The narrative where I was cruel and unsympathetic, where I cared more about my car than my sister's well-being, where a reasonable question became an attack. So I walked away, got my keys, drove my dented, scraped car to work, and called around for repair estimates during my break. $2,800. That's what 3 shops quoted me. $2,800 I didn't have lying around. $2,800 for damage Maya caused. But somehow I was expected to just absorb because pressing for the truth would make me the villain. When I got home that evening, family members had been called, cousins, aunts, the network activated, and somehow, in the retelling, the story had shifted again. Now I was the one who'd pressured Maya to use my car even though she'd been nervous about driving it. I was the one who'd made her feel rushed. I was the one who hadn't maintained the car properly so the brakes weren't responsive. My name was being used in sentences I wasn't part of, in a tone that suggested I was responsible for something I'd never touched. I stood in the doorway listening to my mother explain to my aunt how stressful this had been for poor Maya, how traumatic, how difficult it was when family members weren't supportive during a crisis. That's when I realized the truth had no seat at this table. It never had. Facts were just inconvenient obstacles to the story everyone needed to believe. The story where Maya was the victim, always the victim, and someone else, usually me, was the cause. I didn't argue, didn't correct the record, didn't point out that I'd never pressured anyone, that the car had been serviced 3 weeks earlier, that none of this made any sense. I just went upstairs, pulled out my laptop, and started looking at apartment listings. Because I finally understood something I should have understood years earlier. I couldn't fix this. I couldn't explain my way out of it. I couldn't prove my innocence in a court where the verdict was decided before the trial started. All I could do was leave. Within 2 weeks, I'd signed a lease on a studio apartment across town. Tiny. Barely affordable. But mine. I thought distance would give us space to reset. That time apart would create room for perspective. That maybe, eventually, someone would look back and realize the pattern hadn't been fair. I was wrong. Distance just made the assumptions more solid, permanent. I became the sister who abandoned everyone, who chose herself over family, who made everything complicated by refusing to just accept how things were. None of these ideas matched reality, but reality had stopped being something we shared. 13 years is a long time to live outside the orbit of people who once defined your entire world. During those years, I worked whatever jobs kept rent paid and food on the table. I brewed coffee at 4 a.m. in a shop that smelled like burned beans and desperation, cleaned office buildings at night, pushing a cart through empty cubicles under fluorescent lights that made everything look gray, picked up shifts at catering companies on weekends, serving food to people at parties I'd never be invited to. None of it was glamorous. All of it was necessary. But somewhere in those early morning coffee shifts, I started noticing patterns. What people ordered, what they came back for, what made them smile even when they were barely awake. The desserts. Always the desserts. A good brownie could change someone's entire morning. A perfectly balanced cupcake could make a bad day slightly less bad. There was something almost chemical about it. Sugar and butter and chocolate working magic on human brains. So I started experimenting. I'd finish my shift at the coffee shop, come home to my tiny studio with its 2-burner stove and approximately 6 inches of counter space, and bake brownies, cookies, cupcakes, anything I could make in small batches and bring to work the next day. My coworkers loved it, started requesting specific things: chocolate chip cookies with sea salt, lemon bars with extra tart filling, dark chocolate brownies that were almost fudge. Then customers started asking where the treats came from. Could they order some? Could I cater their office party? I said yes before I'd figured out how. That's how it started. Small orders. Birthday cakes for coworkers, cookie platters for office meetings, nothing big enough to quit my day job, just enough to cover groceries and start building a savings account that didn't immediately get drained by emergencies. I filed LLC paperwork on a Thursday, waited 2 weeks for approval. When the email came through confirming my business existed legally, I sat in my car in the parking lot of my apartment complex and cried. Not sad crying, relief crying. The kind that happens when you realize you've built something real out of nothing but effort and stubbornness. The business grew slowly, steadily. I added equipment piece by piece. A used commercial mixer from a restaurant going out of business. Bulk supplies ordered online and delivered to my building's lobby in boxes too heavy to carry upstairs in one trip. Eventually, I leased space in an industrial kitchen on Denver's east side, shared with 3 other small food businesses. We worked different shifts, crossed paths in the middle of the night, traded advice about suppliers and permits and how to deal with health inspectors. It felt like building something real, something that existed entirely outside the story my family had decided about me. While I was doing that, Maya was building her own story online. I didn't follow her social media, didn't need to. Screenshots forwarded by concerned acquaintances reached me anyway. Her posts followed a pattern: vague references to betrayal, photos of sunsets with captions about rising after darkness, quotes about chosen family being stronger than blood. Never my name, never specific details, just enough context for people who knew us to fill in the blanks. Comments poured in. You're so strong. Some people only care about themselves. She positioned herself as the wounded survivor, the sensitive soul betrayed by someone who should have protected her. It was a compelling narrative, clean, simple, with a clear villain and a sympathetic hero. The fact that none of it matched what actually happened was irrelevant. Stories don't need to be true to be believed. Meanwhile, I kept my head down and baked. Contracts landed. A local coffee shop started carrying my brownies. Then 5, an office building signed on for weekly deliveries. I hired my first employee, then a second, then a third. My business became real enough that banks stopped laughing when I asked about loans, real enough that I started looking at houses. And then, last month, something shifted. A corporate client ordered desserts for their entire holiday event. Another company signed on for 6 months. A wedding venue added me to their preferred vendor list. Suddenly, I wasn't just surviving. I was ahead. Ahead enough that my accountant suggested I purchase property. So I started looking. Found a 3-bedroom house on a quiet street on Denver's east side. Nothing fancy, just solid. Good bones. A kitchen with actual counter space. Rooms I hadn't decided how to use yet. I closed 30 days later. Signed papers, took keys, stood in my empty living room feeling like I'd somehow cheated the system, like someone would show up any minute and explain this was all a mistake. But no one showed up. The house was mine, legally, completely mine. That first night, I slept on an air mattress in an empty bedroom and felt peace I hadn't known existed. The next morning, my family arrived, loud, persistent, too early for deliveries. I looked through the peephole, my mother, my sister Maya, and 2 people I vaguely recognized as extended family, standing on my porch, with luggage. I hadn't seen them in 13 years, not a call, text, or email. 13 years of absolute silence. But now, standing at my brand new front door, they looked at me like the gap had been a long weekend instead of over a decade. My mother spoke first through the door. "Haley, honey, we need to talk. Can you let us in?" Not sorry. Not we missed you. Just let us in. Like I owed them access. Like this house I bought with money I earned was somehow theirs too. I stood there processing, trying to understand how they even knew where I lived. Then Maya's voice, softer, wounded. "Please, Haley, we drove 5 hours. We're family." Family. The word felt like a weapon. I cracked the door, didn't open it, just enough to see their faces clearly. "How did you find my address?" My mother's expression tightened. That look, the one I remembered, the one that meant I was being difficult. "Your business is registered public. It wasn't hard." Right, public records. They'd actually researched me, not to apologize, to locate. "What do you want?" I asked. "To see you," my mother said. "To reconnect. It's been so long." Maya shifted her weight. "We thought, maybe we could stay a few days, get to know each other again." Stay. In my house. The house they had no part in building. I felt something click into place, something cold and clear. They didn't come because they missed me. They came because I had something now. Space, stability, resources, 13 years of silence. And now they wanted in. "No," I said. My mother blinked. "What? No, you can't stay here." "Haley, don't be ridiculous. We drove all this way." "I didn't ask you to." Maya's eyes filled with tears. Right on cue. "I can't believe you'd turn us away. After everything." "After everything?" I cut her off. "I haven't heard from any of you in 13 years. Not once. And now you show up unannounced, expecting to move in?" "We're your family," my mother said, voice rising. "You stopped being my family when you decided I was the problem without ever asking my side." The words came out steady, calm. I wasn't angry. I was done. I closed the door, locked it, and walked back to my kitchen. The knocking continued for another 10 minutes, then voices, muffled arguments, then car doors, engine starting, gravel crunching, then silence. I sat at my kitchen table and waited for guilt to show up, for doubt to creep in. It didn't. What showed up instead was clarity. I'd spent years trying to earn approval from people who'd already decided who I was, the disappointing one, the difficult one, the one who abandoned them. Nothing I did would change that story, so why keep trying? About an hour later, my phone started blowing up. Texts from relatives I barely knew. "How could you turn away your own mother?" "Maya's devastated. This is cruel." Then Maya posted. Of course she did. I didn't look, but screenshots came through mutual contacts anyway. A photo of her crying in a car. Caption about being rejected by the one person she thought would understand. Hashtags about family trauma and healing. The comments poured in. "You deserve better." "Family isn't always blood. Stay strong." She was running the same playbook. Position herself as wounded, imply betrayal, collect sympathy. It had worked for decades. Why change now? I put my phone on silent and got back to work. Orders didn't stop because my family showed up. Deliveries still needed making. Invoices still needed sending. Life kept moving. Over the next week, the messages got more aggressive. My mother, "You've changed, and not for the better. Extended family, we're disappointed in you." Maya, "I hope you're happy being alone." I didn't respond to any of them. 2 weeks later, my mother sent an email, long, detailed, laying out everything she'd sacrificed for me. Every meal, every ride, every dollar spent raising me. Like those things had been loans with interest, like being a parent was an investment she expected returns on. I archived the email without responding. A month after they showed up at my door, Maya posted that she'd been forced to find work because family couldn't help. Interesting framing. They'd driven to my house uninvited, demanding free housing. I'd said no, and somehow that became me refusing to help. I let the post sit, didn't engage, didn't correct the record. People who knew me knew the truth. People who didn't had already chosen their narrative. 3 months later, Maya sent an email. Short, practical. Subject line mentioned work. She asked if I knew anywhere hiring flexible shifts. No accusations, No emotional manipulation, just a straightforward request. I sent back a list of agencies and local businesses I knew were hiring, then went back to my spreadsheets. A few weeks after that, another message. This one, just a photo. Maya in a plain uniform. Employee badge clipped to her shirt. Fluorescent lights overhead. The first image I'd seen of her where she wasn't the center of a tragedy. I saved the file and left it in a folder on my computer. Didn't treat it as proof she'd changed. Just quiet evidence that whatever she did from here was her responsibility, not mine. Around 6 months after that morning on my porch, my mother reached out again. Different tone this time. Stripped of performance. She asked if she could see the house. Once? Just her? I answered with clear terms. Specific day. Specific time. Only her. When she arrived, she walked through the rooms carefully, noticing things. The organized pantry, the commercial-grade mixer, the absence of clutter that used to swallow every surface in the house we shared. We sat at the kitchen table. She commented on small, practical things. The sturdy chairs, the deep sink, the fact that I had enough plates for a full dinner party. She didn't mention the 13 years. I didn't ask for explanations. We both understood that no combination of words could undo the pattern that made me the problem and Maya the story. What we had instead was brief, honest distance. Two adults in separate lives meeting in a space that belonged fully to one. When she left, she paused with her hand on the doorframe. Not a claim, not a blessing, just a small, reluctant acknowledgement that whatever authority she once assumed over my life had quietly expired. Time kept moving. Nearly a year after I bought the house, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Maya got promoted. Shift supervisor position. Her online presence changed too. Fewer vague posts about betrayal. More tired jokes about late shifts and caffeine. The story she fed the world no longer revolved entirely around being wronged. Whether her private narrative about me softened or hardened, I chose not to monitor. It wasn't my job anymore. I stayed outside their orbit. Didn't resume being the fixer, the backup, the emotional sponge. On rare occasions when I chose to help, I did it the way I handle any business decision. Specific, intentional, with limits. Covering a clearly defined bill. Sending information they could use or ignore. Nothing beyond that. The rest of my energy went to people standing in front of me now. Employees who showed up early and told the truth. Neighbors who asked how I was doing without digging for gossip. Friends who cared about my well-being without needing a villain. My house gradually filled with end-of-week potlucks, low-stakes game nights, quiet conversations over leftover pastries. The rooms that once echoed with absence filled with laughter that didn't require me to shrink to be allowed in. Looking back, I don't see this as some clever revenge arc. There was no moment where I won in a way that would satisfy a movie script. What happened was quieter, and to me, more important. I stopped letting other people's denial dictate my days. I learned that love without boundaries isn't generosity, it's erosion. I learned you can wish someone well without giving them a key to your front door, your bank account, or your nervous system. I learned that being called selfish by people who benefit from your exhaustion is not a reliable measure of your worth. If there's anything I hope you take from this, it's permission. Permission to close doors that only open to strip you of yourself. You're allowed to protect the life you built, even when the hands knocking are familiar. You're allowed to choose quiet, honest peace over a performance that keeps everyone else comfortable while you disappear. Thank you for staying with my story, wherever you are, whatever time the clock shows. If this stirred something in you about your own boundaries, you can keep that reflection private, share it with someone you trust, or leave a piece of it here so others feel less alone. However you decide to respond, remember this: protecting yourself isn't cruelty. It's the beginning of living in a way that finally makes sense.